Hello, everybody, and welcome to Nathan on Shuffle and to my latest episode of New Album Spotlight, the show where I put the spotlight on a new album in progressive rock that I've really been loving, that I want to recommend to you all that watch my channel. If you have similar taste in music as me, these will be albums that you really enjoy, and I like to do this on basically a weekly basis and cover all the major prog releases that come out, as well as picking out some hidden gems that I think people need to pay attention to. So today I have an album, the latest release from Inside Out Music, who are one of the big premier progressive rock labels, and this is Nad Sylvan's album Monumentata. And Nad Sylvan's an artist that I've been following for quite some time. I first heard about him in his Agents of Mercy project that he did with Royna Stolt. Of course, Royna Stolt is one of my favorite musicians of all time, who's the main mastermind behind the Flower Kings and is also a big part of Transatlantic with Neil Morse and Mike Portnoy and Pete Trewavas, a big supergroup. And so when Royna Stolt had a new project and was bringing on board this artist that he really admired called Nad Sylvan, I was all in and excited to hear what they had cooked up together. And I love those Agents of Mercy albums. I believe there's 3 of them that came out, and each unique in their own different ways. I love Nad Sylvan because he just has such a interesting character and persona about him. He's just a very unique figure and is purely himself and doesn't change who he is for what people expect or what, the world would want. He just embraces his unique character, which I really respect and appreciate from him. He's a Swedish artist, and really his notable solo album started with Courting the Widow in 2015, followed by The Bride Said No and The Regal Bastard, which is basically the vampire trilogy, so to speak, of records that follow this kind of narrative similarity and conceptual feel. And then he came out with Spiritus Mundi in 2021, which was a really interesting, cool record, kind of a breather of, aside from those, a little bit of a lighter, a more poppier feel compared to those Vampire Trilogy records. And now he comes out with a very personal record called Monumentata, which I've been really just totally loving and enjoying. It's 4 years since his previous record. He does a lot of work with Steve Hackett's band. They do, of course, a lot of Genesis material as they tour around the country. And it seems like Steve Hackett tours totally nonstop. So the members of his band just devote a lot of time to that project and have trouble kind of making time and carving out time for their own musical endeavors. We heard about this from Jonas Reingold, who's part of that group as well, when he released his Car Mechanic album earlier this year. It had been several years since he'd released a Car Mechanic record just because he was so busy with Steve Hackett's touring band. And same case here with Nad Sylvan, who, luckily enough for us and fans of his, was able to carve out some time to release a solo record, even though he's somewhat of the lead singer, frontman for Steve Hackett's band, has an incredible voice that really works well in those songs, has a bit of a Peter Gabriel quality to his vocals, certainly. But I don't think he's a Peter Gabriel clone, as you might expect, but has his own unique timbre and his own unique quality to his vocals that is purely his. And even though he can really nail that Peter Gabriel style, I think he really showcases his own sense of individuality through this record and through all of his solo works that he's done. And his music really draws heavily from the golden age of progressive rock while blending in folk and classical and modern rock influences, making music that sounds at the same time classic and nostalgic, but also modern and fresh, and fits right into the kind of the modern prog rock landscape as well. So it's a great blend and balance that he's able to provide here. And I love how these songs are pretty varied. They go through different styles and different touchstones as you listen to each one. Sometimes he delves into almost an R&B kind of funk flavor. Sometimes it's a little bit more folky and laid back. Sometimes he's doing something that has heavy, like, power pop influences. But the prog elements are always underlying it all and tying it together, and the incredible musicianship that he has and that the guest stars that he's brought on board have bring a new character in life to this release and make it head and shoulders above just kind of your standard pop and rock fare that comes out in the more mainstream world. So, and just as a laundry list of collaborators here, people who are playing on this record, we've got Lally Larson on synthesizers, who plays, with Flower Kings, who played, I believe, on Agents of Mercy as well. Joe Dennison on violin, who's played with recent Kansas iteration. David Collar on guitar, Neil Whitford on guitar, Randy McStein on guitar, who's played with Porcupine Tree and Steven Wilson, Tony Levin on bass, Nick Beggs on bass, Jonas Reingold on bass. We got Marco Miniman, Felix Lerman, and Marco DeMao on drums, who are fantastic players, and some female backing vocalists, Shiona Urquhart and Jade L. So a fantastic group of guest musicians and stars, but really Nad Sylvan is at front and center doing all the lead vocals on the record and most of the backing vocals, doing keyboards, electric and acoustic guitar, and bass himself. So just an excellent multi-instrumentalist, a great songwriter, and he really showcases his character through this release. And I think that's what sets it apart from some of his prior releases that he's done, that Vampirate trilogy, that this is more personal and more about his story and the things that he has gone through in his life. And you hear that throughout the record, throughout these pieces. And so many highlights, so many great tracks. Starts off with Secret Lover, which begins with some interesting atmosphere before you get kind of a primal scream, lead into a really cool rock riff. So it leads to a pretty straightforward rock song, but it has Nad's unique vocal timbre to it, a cool groove, a bit of a throwback feel, some soaring guitar solos, and some almost psychedelic flavor in certain sections throughout the track. That's Not Me is a more heavier, aggressive track, and it has a bit of a funk influence. Nad Sylvan, I believe himself, says it's a little bit like James Brown meets Deep Purple, which is a fun way to think about it. Great rock riff starts this piece. There's some really cool bass work from Tony Levin here, some harder rock in the choruses, but it still retains that unique proggy flavor that really makes Nad Sylvan stand out amongst the rest. Some great catchy hooks, some cool proggy keys, adding a cool twist to this really cool, fun track. Monte Carlo Priceless is one of my favorite tracks on the record, talking about Nad Sylvan's parents. His dad was a tennis star in the 50s, played in the U.S. Open, Wimbledon, Monte Carlo. That's where the Monte Carlo reference of this track comes in. Nad Sylvan's mother was there with him, but it's more about kind of a picture of the setting of that Monte Carlo. And it's just a wonderful, fun R&B style song, very nostalgic 70s feel to it, some lovely acoustic guitar and heartfelt vocals. I feel this kind of breezy, windswept kind of feel to it, and it's just a fun listen. And there's even a section where you hear some like flute and horn work in a very inviting, fun, kind of jazzier way. Just one of my favorite tracks of the year. I think he really nails this kind of breezy 50s, 60s kind of vibe, but keeps it modernized, doesn't make it sound like dated and old-fashioned, and it's just a wonderful blend of influences and styles. Flowerland is more of kind of a power pop type song, very sunny and joyful, with some really unique musical elements to elevate it. Wildfire is a fun track as well, has some really cool acoustic guitars and bass work, bright playful vibe, a lot of character and expressiveness, a great explosive synth solo from Lally Larson, has kind of a lush, slow build type feel to it, some cool vocal oohs and ahs, and a definite highlight of the record right in the middle of it. I absolutely love this track. I think it's one of the more proggier, more interesting, varied tracks on the record. Make Somebody Proud is super fun. It's proggy but funky, has some upbeat female backing vocals, but also some tricky proggy rhythms and keys. To me, it's like a mix of Gentle Giant with some expressive R&B funk. And it's a really fun mixture of different things coming together, surprising you at every turn. And I just love some of the tricky rhythms here and some really cool instrumental sections with expansive keys and furious guitar soloing. I'm Stepping Out is another clever, unique track, almost like a classic television theme song kind of feel to the interesting keys that come out here, a unique poppy vibe, but definitely different than what you might expect, with a little dose of humor to it. Very expressive performance from Nad, some really quirky moments, and it's just totally who Nad Sylvan is as an artist, that he's able to come up with this quirky, clever track that no other artist would have done. So I really love this piece. And then the album closes with Monumentata, the title track, which is one of the more emotional pieces of the record, talking about Nad Sylvan losing his father and knowing that they're gone. And so the title itself, Monumentata, comes from fusing together monumental, because that's how this moment felt for Nad Sylvan, and also Tata, which means father in Hungarian, and his father was half Hungarian. So it kind of speaks to that relationship and development he had with his father. And the track itself is just really gorgeously rendered. Some light electronica ambience and vocalizations with beautiful piano at the beginning leads to this very pure piano ballad. Nad's harmonizing with himself on the choruses are just beautiful, and really emphasizes the emotion of the piece, and it increases in its emotional weight and power as they build with strings and other vocal swells throughout this track, but keep it more subdued and just beautiful. And it's one of my favorite tracks also. It's just a really great ballad to close the record with. And then there's a bonus track, also Unkillable, which kind of is a fun little diversion to end the record on. If Monumentata was maybe a little bit heavy and dark, Unkillable is more lighter, breezier, poppier feel, with some funky keyboards and acoustic guitar and a bit of a bouncy feel and a quirky rhythm. Probably my least favorite on the record, but I'll forgive it because it's a bonus track. And it's fun to have its inclusion here, but I can understand why it was left off the record proper, because it's a fun curio of a track, but not quite as much weight to it as any of the tracks that have come before, in my opinion. So a fantastic record, just runs the gamut between a lot of different styles and feels. There's a lot of fun pop elements to this, a lot of unique moments, some funkiness, some R&B textures, but it never sacrifices the prog factor either, so it pleases the prog fans. And I just really love Nad Sylvan's character and how he brings about his persona into this record, and it's very personal and makes it unique. And I really appreciate that. So it's fun to see an artist stepping out and doing something that's somewhat of a passion project of their own. Seeing him do solo work beyond his stuff he does with Steve Hackett is just a joy. So if you're not familiar with Nad Sylvan, I think this is a great starting point, a great way to see who he is as an artist. Don't expect something overtly like crazy, furious progressive rock playing and all of that virtuosity and stuff. That's not really what this is about. The songs at their core are more like just great hooks, great melodies, things that sink their teeth into you and make you want to return and re-listen, and are just fun to grab your ear and be earworms as you listen and envelop in this musical world that Nad Sylvan has developed. And sometimes I need that. It's a great summer record to just enjoy and to play in the background and to appreciate the work that Nad Sylvan has put into this. So very much a recommendation on my end. I really love it. I think it's a fantastic record that deserves more attention, and hopefully you'll check it out. Let me know in the comments if you've heard this one, how you feel about Nad Sylvan and his solo works. I'd be interested to know. So thank you guys for joining me, and hopefully I'll see you guys in a future review. Bye everybody. Enjoy the music.
In the days today